Well, good afternoon, everyone. As you may have heard, we had Secretary Mattis at lunch today to talk about the Yemen issue, but it's on the floor of the Senate today, as well as defense in general. We're moving toward completing an omnibus appropriation bill, which will fill in the blanks for the significant increase in defense spending that we were able to achieve in the CAPS bill. I think it's important for the country and something that I hope will convince the majority of my colleagues to vote for the omnibus. We anticipate the House filing later today, which will give the Senate plenty of time to take a look at it and see what's in it. We're going to be passing the sex trafficking bill tomorrow that Senator Thune and Senator Portman have been working on, and that'll wrap up the week going into the Easter recess.
On the Yemen resolution that we'll be voting on this afternoon following several hours of debate, our relationships with our allies in the Gulf are really important to our counterterrorism effort against ISIS and al-Qaeda. Chief among those allies is Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, among others. There is a effort being made by the Iranians to support Houthi rebels in Yemen that are actually lobbying Iranian-made or produced missiles into Saudi Arabia. So we are performing support roles, providing refueling, intelligence, and targeting efforts to help the Saudis fight off this challenge from not only the Houthis supported by Iran, but also in a way that will help reduce the number of civilian casualties. We're going to be asking our colleagues to send this matter that's pending back to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, where Senator Corker, the chairman of the committee, Ranking Member Menendez, will have hearings and do a deep drill down into this complex geopolitical challenge for the world. And Senator Corker also announced he will be holding a markup of an authorization for the use of military force, taking a look at the existing AUMF that dates back to roughly 2002 to deal with al-Qaeda and its affiliates. So we've encouraged our colleagues to let the committees do their work. Not everybody is as expert or knowledgeable about this topic as the Committee on Foreign Relations, and we think we can come up with a better, more considered product following the committee's work if we allow them to do their job, and then the Senate can take it up and vote on it and debate it to our heart's content. So we hope our colleagues will join us in sending this back to the committee rather than circumventing the committee and perhaps making some mistakes and unintended consequences in the meantime.
As the leader pointed out, we're going to have an opportunity to vote later this week after we deal with the Yemen issue on legislation that Senator Portman authored, which deals with sex trafficking online. And the reason this is an important issue is between 2010 and 2015, the number of suspected sex trafficking cases increased 846%, according to the Center for Missing and Exploited Children. This is a major issue. Those numbers are totally unacceptable, and it's one that we believe has to be addressed. And Senator Portman's bill goes a long ways toward strengthening penalties against those websites that are facilitating trafficking, sex trafficking online, allows attorneys general to file civil lawsuits, and holds those online, those websites that are involved in this sort of activity accountable. And so it follows on legislation that has either passed the Senate or been signed into law by the President previously. Senator Grassley, Senator Cornyn. We got a number of our senators, Senator Corker, who have had bills that have passed the Senate and been signed into law by the President to attack this issue and to aggressively get out ahead and do everything we can to prevent this sort of activity from occurring in this country. It is something that we can't accept as a culture, and the legislation that we'll be voting on this week will be an important step forward in addressing this very, very serious issue.
A number of you continue to ask me questions about what's going to be in the spending bill with regard to stabilizing the insurance markets. We're going to see the spending bill soon, but there is actually a reform that exists that can actually lower the cost of insurance for people, and it has to do with the short-term markets, expanding those to 364 days, which was the President has supported, as well as guaranteeing a renewal of those specific policies. That gets so many of the decisions out of Washington back to the states, puts states in charge of insurance and opportunities that people can have to buy what works for them, for their families, at lower costs. And they can do it without having to buy all of the bells and whistles that are demanded under the Obama health care law. It is something that gives freedom and flexibility and choice to families. Now, for people who want to buy insurance under Obamacare with all of the mandates incorporated in those policies, they'd still be free to do so. But this is about giving people the freedom to choose what works for them, and I think it is something that we ought to have a vote for, to allow people to actually choose something that they can afford rather than something they can't afford under Obamacare.
The leader mentioned this, but I think in the last few weeks since the CR was passed, we sort of lost sight of what the bill we'll vote on this week will do for national defense, underfunding our defense capabilities, underfunding our training dollars, underfunding having the equipment in the condition that you and I would want it to be in for the men and women that defend us, has caught up with us in the last couple of years. Way too many people injured, way too many lives lost simply because we haven't treated our defense like we should. This bill is the biggest year-over-year increase in defense in 15 years, $61 billion, funding not only new training dollars, new missile defense, but also a pay increase for men and women in uniform. And that is the single biggest thing that we'll be doing in the bill we vote on this week, is trying to restore again the fact that we never want Americans to be in a fair fight. We want them to have every advantage they can possibly have. That advantage has been lost in the last decade. We will vote this week to get back on track to be sure that we always have that advantage for the people that defend us.
It's become more and more clear over the past several weeks that as November draws closer, some of our Democratic colleagues wish to campaign on the focus, their focus on tax increases, raising taxes, undoing the good that we have done with the tax cuts. In fact, it was discussed at the Commerce Committee, a significant tax increase by the Democrats. It's also been talked about by Senator Schumer, his plan to introduce some further legislation that would raise taxes on the American people. But here's excerpts about Colorado from the Associated Press. It talks about dollars that are coming in from the new federal tax law that will dramatically increase state revenue because of the anticipated benefits of that law and the economic activity that will create. And I'll read this paragraph. The U.S. tax law passed last year is encouraging business investment and is expected to increase state tax collections tied to higher federal taxes, the forecast said, as a result of economic growth. So this is a great opportunity for the American people, and certainly far greater benefits to come, and nothing compares to the opportunity we have to cut regulations, continue growing this economy, and the American people know it.
Over the weekend, the President launched a series of attacks against the special counsel. Are you comfortable with the President going after the special counsel in such a direct way?
Well, look, I agree with the President's lawyers that Bob Mueller should be allowed to finish his job. I think it was an excellent appointment. I think he will lead, he will go wherever the facts lead him, and I think he will have great credibility with the American people when he reaches the conclusion of this investigation. So I have a lot of confidence in it. I have a lot of confidence in it.
You talked about the Senate having enough time to process this bill. Your whip here, Senator Cornyn, indicated to some of us earlier that he thought we might have to be here Saturday. Are you confident this can be wrapped up Friday night? And are you concerned about having members here on Saturday from your side of the aisle when there's this big gun protest out front?
Well, what my focus is on is finishing this omnibus appropriation, which will fund the government through September the 30th, and we're going to do it this week. And as long as that takes, that's the time we'll put in to get there.
Yeah. Are you prepared to take any action to protect the special counsel and Rod Rosenstein?
Yeah, I don't
if
think
it comes to that.
Yeah, I just don't think it's necessary. I don't think Bob Mueller is going anywhere. I think there's widespread feeling, and the president's lawyers obviously agree, that he ought to be allowed to finish the job. This is a thoroughly credible individual. It was, I think, an appropriate appointment, and we all anticipate his finishing the job and telling the American people what they need to know about this episode.
Mr. Leader, the president called to congratulate Vladimir Putin today. What message does that send?
Well, the president can call whomever he chooses. When I look at a Russian election, what I see is a lack of credibility in tallying the results. I'm always reminded of the elections they used to have in almost every communist country, where whoever the dictator was at the moment always got a huge percentage of the vote. So calling him wouldn't have been high on my list.
Have you gotten any assurances aside from the White House's public statements that Mueller's job is safe?
Well, I just referred to his lawyers, who believe that he ought to be allowed to finish the job, and that's certainly my view. Thank you.
What would you do if you were fired, sir? What would you do?